Hi, everybody. This is Dixon with the Southwest Collective Board of Directors, and welcome to episode 1 of Southwest Side Stories, our brand new podcast. We're going to be featuring stories of people doing amazing things on the southwest side of Chicago. And fortunately, there's no shortage of people who are doing great things in our community. We'll be doing this podcast every other week, and my co host Jose and I will be alternating interviewing duties. He's going to be doing the first episode, and I will be back in a couple of weeks for episode 2. And before each episode, we'll touch base about who we're talking to and why we think their story is important. And plus, we'll talk a little bit about whatever's top of mind at the moment. So, without further ado, please sit back and enjoy episode 1 of Southwest Side Stories.
It's 4th of July, spent a lot of fireworks around the neighborhood. Chicago is always a sight, driving down the expressway at night. Definitely a mess the day after for cleanup and a whole lot of that. But just been staying busy in the neighborhood and volunteering here with the group and all the good things that happen here. What about you?
Yeah, we had a good fourth. We were out seeing some family in the suburbs, and then one of my favorite things is if we are out doing that on the fourth when we drive home, and we're near the Pulaski exit on 55. We get to the top of the bridge there at the exit, and you can see the entire southwest side in like a 360-degree cacophony of fireworks. So you can see everything going off in Little Village to the north, and you can see everything going off in West Lawn and Archer Heights to the south, and east and west. And it made me think that in, future years, I ought to just ride my bike up to the top of the bridge there and, bring like a lawn chair or something and just sit and watch the show from every single neighborhood all at once.
It's a good plan.
It's kind of cool to see.
Yeah. Hidden gems here on the southwest side, which we'll be uncovering on this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Um,
we've got a good episode here for episode 1. Do you want to talk a little bit about who we're interviewing and the story we're highlighting? It's some youth organizers out of Garfield Ridge.
I mean, that's as much as I've known besides meeting Dave, through the phone and hearing his enthusiasm and his mates. Teenagers organizing around Black Lives Matters during last summer's protest, locally here from the neighborhood of Garfield Ridge, which is a pretty, we have a fair share of problems. We definitely have some shootings, some incidences of violence, but it's a pretty sleepy part of Chicago. There's a lot of municipal workers and a lot of police too. So a lot of people don't think of it as an area that's active with activism. But you actually met Dave and his comrades. How was that facilitating this first interview?
It was great. We met at a job fair in Garfield Ridge a few weeks ago that the collective was a part of, and he was there as well. And we got to talking and got to realize that he was part of this group that was organizing, like you said, the Black Lives Matter protests in Garfield Ridge last summer. Of course, there were protests all across the city, all across the country, but the Garfield Ridge protests got a lot of attention because I think it's a neighborhood where looking at it from the outside, you wouldn't necessarily assume that they would have a large scale Black Lives Matter action, but they did. And the students, in and around Kennedy High School put together something very impressive. So I'm really curious to hear about how that came together, how it was received, and, what these students are doing now, 1 year later.
Yeah, definitely. Can't wait to hear from them about that. And, we'll be highlighting more stories from the Southwest Collective this year. Like you said, we'll probably be doing 2 episodes a month. How's the collective looking at, like I know that the way this, work goes, it's usually project to project, but, the food drive was a pretty big success. I mean, as far as mutual aid went during COVID. Um, yeah, anything else planned down the pipeline?
Yeah, the food drives were great. The Foods Here program was great because we were able to provide some supplemental income at least to some local restaurant workers to help us with the distribution. Um, and we've definitely got a whole bunch of vaccination events coming up this summer. Speaking of Garfield Ridge, we're going to be focusing in the community of Garfield Ridge um, for the rest of the year. And this is in connection with a number of other community groups on the Southwest side that will be focusing on other neighborhoods throughout the Southwest side. But we're going to be trying to get people vaccinated. We're going to be going door to door, talking to people. We are going to be, we're going to have some public events. We're going to be at some movies in the park. We're going to do some stuff at parks and schools and all that. So whatever it takes, we want to make sure that that people get vaccinated and that we really push through and get to where we need to be in terms of putting COVID behind us.
For sure. Getting back to normal wasn't so great for everybody. So like using this opportunity to get, to a better place for all of us has not been easy. As we saw last year. I think, talking to these young people about why, they took action and what they have planned for the near future and how, we all can build a community here that's safe from COVID and poverty and despair and crime and otherwise, definitely going to be great to talk about. Looking forward to this interview that's coming up. Today we're joined by Dave and Nicola, who I grew up here in the neighborhood and have put on some actions last year during the National Black Lives Matter protest movements. Thank you guys so much for joining us on our first episode.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you guys so much. You guys shared with me that you guys just met recently to put these actions together despite growing up, basically on the same block, just blocks away from each other. You guys want to share that story about meeting and then coming to work together?
Yeah, so I guess we'd have to start at the origin of, the revelation that I had last summer when the Black Lives Matter movement was strong and there were protests happening every day around the city. And I was like, why doesn't Garfield Ridge have one, especially with our history being a white flight neighborhood and with Jason Van Dyke residing here, near Hill Park. I was just outraged that, our neighborhood should be one of the ones taking the most action, but given some of the populations being very, having white supremacist beliefs, I thought it would be a real chance to kind of show that the youth in our neighborhood doesn't hold the same beliefs as them, because we've never really had such a thing happen. So I called upon some of my good friends that I did have in the neighborhood to kind of, brainstorm ideas. And I made a flyer. I don't know what my intention was besides, create something meaningful and actually action-orientated activism work. But one day I got an email from Dave, and he basically said, "Hi, I'm a Pomona student. I'd love to get involved." And when I saw that, I was just wooed away because I'm from the same consortium that he goes to. And yeah, you want to say more about that?
Absolutely. If we kind of take a step out of where we all are right now and go back to that very urgent period of time, I think, in all of our lives where we were simultaneously living through quarantine and unprecedented pandemic health crisis, and also now, flaring racial tensions in our country. When I sent that email, I was in a rush to hell. I wanted to see what my community was doing, what was going on near me. And the moment I found out how I could help, I wanted to be there, and I wanted to offer my services however I could do that. And my, it's funny because I generally try to use social media in moderation, which as a consequence, I think Garfield Ridge is like a Facebook-heavy community in terms of figuring out a lot of what's going on these days, maybe not so different from a lot of our communities now. But my mom found this flyer that Nicola had and some of the other organizers involved had sent out, and she told me, hey, you should think about this. You should go to this. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to help with this. I want more people to know about this. So I emailed, and it was a very fast evening because we began reaching out to local press outlets and making final plans and inviting elected officials, and I just sort of wanted to figure out where I fell into the scheme of things because it was all very fast.
And Dave really was a great help with outreach, because I really didn't know what I was doing. I had no experience in organizing something like this. So as soon as David went on board, it felt like things were really coming together.
That's very kind.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then you guys did put on this action. You said you reached out to elected officials. There was a lot going on last year. I did hear about it. I heard you had some attention from it too. You want to share a little bit about that, how the event actually went?
Yeah. I think more than attention, when, in my mind at least, in the work we were doing, and I'd love to know also how you were sort of feeling as this is all unfolding, because it was so fast and it was so rapid. More than attention, we, as an organization, I think we agreed that we wanted conversation. Because it was a conversation that had been, and now to a lesser extent continues to be, politely avoided where we live and where we've grown up. And it wasn't about any of us. It was about the future of our community and, on a greater scale, I think the future of our city. And obviously, each and every single Black Lives Matter protest and racial justice action last summer began at a local level in some shape or form. And I think our hope was simply to ignite that conversation. But you're right, we did get a lot of attention. And when I jumped in, I wanted to be outreach director if they didn't have one already, because I'd done some campaign work and some other advocacy and activism. So I emailed frantically the TV stations and the newspapers, and I actually got a response from Mitchell Armentrout at the Sun-Times and Marie Newman's campaign staff.
J.B. Pritzker also acknowledged us as well.
Yes, yeah, Governor Pritzker's office acknowledged. But when the Clearidge Reporter, our local newspaper, and the Sun-Times showed up, it was such a validation. I want to know, how did you feel like throughout all of this? Because we were all sort of just working. I mean, honestly, it was just working. It was just like texting, like being there, like getting water, doing whatever.
I just felt an enormous amount of pride to be in like a place where we all come together. I think it was about 300 people who came to Kennedy High School.
All over the city.
From all over the city. I've had friends from like Franklin Park by O'Hare come in to show support. And it was really like, it was just a challenge to the previous held like notions that were permeating throughout our neighborhood during this time. There was a lot of tension, I'd have to say. We did run into a few problems, especially with location and trying to plan our routes. And of course, Facebook discourse.
A lot of disinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about the threat?
Yeah, so we got threats from a biker gang, actually.
Yes.
Police neighborhood.
We were supposed to plan it just on a public property in Garfield Ridge, but on Facebook we saw that if we did hold it there, then some bikers will come and deform our skulls or something like
Yes,
that.
they said they were going to bash our skulls in if we chose a
Yes.
certain location.
So of course, like first and foremost, we cared about the safety of our community and those who chose to attend. So we definitely did take precautions, and we were very nervous because we weren't really getting a lot of support on Facebook, where misinformation thrives. So it was at some points it did feel dangerous, but we know that there was also copious amount of support coming from the other side.
And that outpouring was so reassuring.
It was.
And I think the fact, it's just like if you think back to the 4th of July, right? That wasn't too long ago. And you think of a sparkler, and you think of, how you can spread the fire from one to another. I think that was the most rewarding part of being able to witness this. The fact that 300 people and more were impacted visibly by this. 300 chose to show up with their bodies, with their families, with their faces, and speak to local media about this and speak to the future of their community. But even more than that, in the ensuing days and weeks, I'm very involved in my parish, and I think often on the Southwest side especially, Catholic parishes can be something of a bastion of cultural conservatism. And I recall, being really reluctant to show up at church because I didn't know what the folks were going to think of me, what the little comment here or there would be. And the response was so funny. An old teacher from my elementary school who's very involved in the parish as well, because I attended the parish school, actually came up to me during a training session. We were all figuring out how to work with COVID at worship services. And he sort of tiptoed over to me during our water break at the training, and he said, "Dave, I'm so glad you're doing this. It's way past time." And I said, "Oh my gosh, it's seeping through. There is rooting going on. There is a sprout coming out of the concrete that cannot be stopped." And if we want to, I know you want to mention, Jose, that you wanted to discuss the work and the impact that it continues to have on the community. I think beginning that very week that we planned that first event, I don't know, did you see a change? I felt a change.
Definitely, I felt an enormous change because it was no longer that these things were just pushed under a rug. We were challenging these beliefs on Facebook. There would be people from my age group responding to all of the racist comments left on posts about the protest. There was more action to be done. We started this momentum, I feel like, and it was visible, and I think that some residents were actually threatened by it.
They felt threatened, and that was the sad. I think that breaks my heart, because it's not at all what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And when you guys are, say you're 19, 20 years old, you guys are young. I'm 35, I grew up in the city, and but you guys are touching upon heavy ideas that I didn't touch upon until I was an undergrad or even post-undergrad. The southwest side of Chicago does have a cultural conservatism that stems from its parishes. There is an undercurrent of white supremacist feeling in our neighborhood, even though it's sleepy and rather peaceful, but it manifests in people feeling threatened by simple conversations.
Yes.
And I think that's what was so inspiring to me too. I did feel that marked change in the neighborhood. I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but it was this. It was young people putting older people on notice that you're well aware and witnessing what's happening here in our community and our society. So I also want to say thank you guys so much for doing this. And what has the work been like, now, like a year out and moving forward? I guess now where are you guys at with that?
So I guess my activism sort of is definitely, I'm not like a in-your-face person, so I definitely try to take the high road and do what I can for myself and for my community in whatever way I can. And right now I'm at an internship at a publication, and I actually run the Black Lives Matter section in email. And essentially I'm interviewing artists, usually from the African diaspora or Black people in America, about their artwork and trying to elevate these voices that are criminally understated. So yeah, and I definitely
awesome.
keep up with all that's happening now. I know that the movement kind of lost momentum ever since that we started gaining our rights back, and the pandemic is quote unquote over. A lot of people kind of treated it as a trend, but I don't really see it that way. And whenever an opportunity arises to kind of create change or promote racial justice, I try to take it, especially being white and coming from a police-dominated neighborhood. I think that was my main problem, is there was nothing happening when a lot of our neighbors are police, and that we were kind of Black Lives Matter movement is also a critique of police brutality as well. So something needed to be happen. And
Yeah, definitely. And I think the work that you are doing is amazing, and I really appreciate your role, but also the other organizers' role. And I before we continue, I want to take a good moment, to thank everyone else from our court team who could not be here today, especially Ariana Ascencio, and a handful of other very special dear friends and fellow organizers, but also adults. Yes, you, supportive adults in the community.
There were people giving out water as we were going past, or standing in front of their lawns, cheering us on with their children.
Running into their homes, their businesses, to bring us snacks, to bring us water, bringing their children out, to cheer us on. And folks in the community of Summit, too, where, we did a cross-municipal effort as we did our Juneteenth march. Down 63rd Street, terminating at Summit Park. Reverend Jimmy Daniels, the former chair of the Rainbow Push Coalition, was extremely helpful to us and a great mentor to me in sort of calming me down and reminding me of why we were there and the power of our voices.
Hi, my name is Ariana Ascencio, and I was one of the organizers that helped coordinate the Black Lives Matter protest here in Garfield Ridge that happened about this time last year. And I was asked to speak a little bit about how it all happened. How did we get to the point where we were organizing a protest? And everything happened through social media, because it was the beginning of Corona and no one could really get together, and if you were getting together, you were now cross-contaminating. Everything was new with COVID, and we just didn't know. So all the organizing happened through the phone, through group chats, through long conversations, Zoom calls, Zoom meetings. Everything happened through there. But it really started with one of the organizers. I'm not sure if she wants her name mentioned, so I will not mention it. However, she messaged me, and she was a good friend from high school, and she had flown home, and she was seeing all of peers that we went to high school with post very anti-Black and very just uneducated responses on what Black Lives Matter was. And she messaged me and she was like, I just don't understand how we all went to the same high school, we all live in the same community, and how they don't understand. And we were having these conversations, us as organizers, we were having these conversations with some of our friends, and they didn't understand either. And I got a message from her and she was like, I think we should organize a protest. And I said, okay, count me in, like that, let's do this. Who can we, like, what do we need to do? And so it was just a snowball effect after that. We originally wanted to keep the event very private. We were really scared. Well, scared is an overstatement. We were worried about the response the community was going to have with a Black Lives Matter protest happening here, because it is, a lot of cops do live within this neighborhood, and there's just also a lot of conservative views that are normalized in this neighborhood. Not that that's bad, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. However, it's just the reality of what is and what is spoken in our neighborhood. So when we were organizing it, we wanted to keep everything very private. All of us were just gonna show up on the island, on Archer and Narragansett, and just stand there and protest. You know, obviously, like, we were worried because we didn't know if we were gonna be arrested. What was the repercussions? Was it public property, private property? There was a lot of legal things that we needed to work out. So me and the organizer that reached out to me, she ended up messaging one of our former high school teachers that we did student government with. She was amazing, and she helped us with everything. She said, okay, you want to know whether or not it is public or private property? Let's look this up. Let's see what you need. Do you need a permit? Do you need this? And she was helping guide us like she knew how to organize a protest. And I don't think she would mind me saying her name, just because she is who she is and she's unapologetically herself. But Sarah White, she's a teacher at Kennedy High School. She was amazing with this. She helped us organize it, and so we were skeptical. We had told her we weren't sure how the community was going to respond, so we decided as organizers that we were going to keep it small, with a group of people that we knew were not going to be destructive. And there was just a lot of misconception on, like, Black Lives Matter protests at that point, because everyone assumed that they were just going to be looting, and they were worried. So we wanted to make sure that that was not the image that we were going to bring in the community, and so that our community didn't have a bad and negative interaction with a Black Lives Matter protest. So we ended up deciding to do it on the island. We were going to release that information a day beforehand. We were thinking even hours beforehand, because we did not want to get shut down, but we were also really, really worried about the response. So we ended up we set up an email, we set out an objective sheet that had all of our objectives, what we were there for, what we were going to be doing, what is the route that we were going to be taking, different, just so that way, in case you were arrested, like, this is what I'm here for, this is what, and the other organizer, she wrote that all out in detail. It was very impressive, and we had everything organized, and everything was private up until this point. And then after that, it was chaos a little bit, because word got out. We don't even know how. Like, we started telling, like, our friends a little bit of, like, please keep this information, but obviously, word gets around. Parents must have seen or heard, or said something, or someone regardless, the word got out, and it got out to like the Facebook group chats, the Facebook neighborhood pages, everything. And everyone had very colorful responses to this. Some people were very, yes, this is a conversation that needs to be happening within our community, and agreed with us. And some people were no, and I remember one of the emails that we were all very shocked at when we were organizing it is when we were talking to our teacher, she had looked up all the legal information. She was like, no, I think this lady is kind of, we had gotten an email from one of the ladies within our community saying, the island is a sacred place to some people in our community, and they might not like it that you're there. And we had already anticipated people wanting to not have us here and make up excuses. But we were not willing to fight, but we were willing to stand our ground and say, like, no, this is a conversation that needs to be had. But the more we got into it, the more that we were having this conversation, she was like, no, this is a veteran island. We were like, oh, okay. And I remember we had an email from the veterans saying that we will not stand for this, that we do not give you permission. And we had people commenting on our Facebook posts, or we didn't have a Facebook, but other people were sharing it. And bikers, like veteran bikers, were threatening to like smash skulls. And we were like, oh no, we cannot, we do not need this. We cannot endanger the lives of people that are attending our, the protest that we're organizing. So that led to having more conversations. We ended up getting in contact with the principal at Kennedy. He ended up hosting us. He said, we cannot actually stand anywhere, but we can take a route and we can march. And I will work with people and work with security so that way he can get you from point A to point B to point C and then back to point A. And that is what we did. We had to reorganize everything. We had a Venmo account that had people donating money in order for us to get, snacks, in order for us to print out the objective sheets so that way we can hand them out to people. It was very much, we did all of that. And leading up to the event, obviously we had to make announcements saying we're not going to be protesting on the island. We're going to be protesting. We're meeting at Kennedy High School's parking lot. Then we are going to take this route. And it was very much getting in contact with teachers. There was 2 or 3 teachers that were just phenomenal. Like I am a former Kennedy alumni, and their response to wanting to help out students that former students was just, it was very heartwarming, but it was also critical to, it was one of the strongest things that we had when organizing, and something that we really, I don't think I appreciated enough when we were setting up organizing everything and setting everything up, because it quickly could have gone awry without their help. And I do want to give them credit for everything they did for us during that time. But yeah, that was the roller coaster of what, like, the small seed that we were just gonna all meet up at the island and protest, and how it turned into being hosted by Kennedy High School and having the principal there and having other community leaders there.
I want to hear also about what you're doing now, because I know that he's doing a lot for the community as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicola. Well, to keep it short and sweet, after our actions, I actually joined a congressional campaign and worked on the communications team. It was a West Suburban congressional campaign, and attempted to bring voice to voters of color in a lot of the media that was being produced on this campaign. in order to reach this very diverse district more effectively. And I actually went on to work as a full-time campaign staffer. I took a gap year from school and I moved first to South Bend, Indiana, worked on a congressional campaign there, was the point organizer for the Black community in South Bend for this congressional campaign and for the Latinx community there. I then moved up to Montana and worked for former Governor Steve Bullock's Senate race and worked with folks on the ground to organize our urban Native community in Great Falls, Montana. Also Montana's most historic Black community there in Great Falls as well. And then after that, after November, unfortunately we did lose, but it was a very hard-fought campaign, and I learned a great deal about rural organizing and the diversity of rural America. And Garfield Ridge taught me a lot about really being able to have those uncomfortable conversations successfully with working class folks, with folks who are just trying to get by and who are trying to make an honest living and playing by the rules, as it were, but who may not notice that those rules are skewed, and that there is a way for us to widen the door of opportunity. And then after that, finally, I moved to Athens, Georgia, and I worked on the Georgia coordinated campaign for now Senators Ossoff and Warnock during the runoffs, and actually had the honor and privilege of organizing one of Georgia's most historic Black communities in Wilkes County, which is the cradle of the Confederacy. Wilkes County itself is actually where, in 1865, the cabinet of the Confederacy gathered to disband. And a lot of those Midway memories came flooding back to me from our work at the Civil Rights Coalition. When I was, driving down those lonely roads and knocking on those difficult doors and living in the shadow, very poignant shadow of our past, our shared past.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you both for so much for the work you've done, that you're doing, and continue to do. It's definitely inspiring, to see young people, take on the issues in America, unapologetically and forthright. And on that note, what are, how do you guys feel about the future in America? We have, in 5 years from now, things might look, very different. 2015 seems like a lifetime ago, even though it wasn't. These next 5 years, might be very formative for yourselves and for America. What are your hopes and expectations, moving forward?
That's a big one.
It's really big.
I'll just get the elephant out of the room. I think my main hope is that we are further along the way on the journey that didn't begin last year, although it may have felt like it. It did not. But I hope the torch of human rights continues to be passed forward in all areas, in gender equality, in racial equality, in sexual equality, with the advances that we've seen in the LGBTQ community. I think more importantly, maybe for me, what I really, really want to see in America is us being able to talk to each other again. And that sounds very vanilla. That sounds very, well, why? Let's put party. And it's not just about that. Really being able to see one another as human is crucial to making any civic advances. And I need that to happen in 2025. I need us to work towards that together.
Definitely. Yeah, I think my main hope is for us to think more critically. Extreme information is stirring up like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and it's easy to get sucked into it. And yeah, we really have to address that. So, to stop white supremacy, and we really have to also reform the systems, because I don't think that white supremacy is just white supremacist. It's really the systems in place that are preventing minorities from getting the same opportunities and respect as white Americans, and racism, it comes in too many forms, and I think that they're all worth addressing because you really can't have one without the other. But
And can I hop in real
of
quick?
course, please.
I also have hopes for Garfield Ridge in the near term future, and I hold
Definitely.
those just as dear as I think I hold the hopes for our country. And I was so privileged to move into communities basically on a dime across the nation to work on campaigns to fully be a part of the electoral process. And one thing that I learned was that one way that my upbringing in Garfield Ridge served me so well was I understood the beauty and value of community and communitarian sort of like movement towards the common good. Because if there is one thing that Garfield Ridgers do very well, it's organize. For whatever that may be. There are not pretty, there are very ugly things that people in our neighborhood have organized for, just as there are beautiful things that people in our neighborhood, all kinds of things, whenever someone a couple blocks over, parents find out their child has a rare disease, you see people walking around the neighborhood with special shirts on, I recall in high school, my second year at St. Lawrence, just as we were preparing to go co-ed, one of the students from Queen of Peace who their family happened to be dear friends of ours in the community, passed away from a rare form of cancer. And the community pulled together in such a beautiful way. And my hope is that we continue to have the ability to be neighbors with one another, but that we let go of the need to be the same. Because that is what has held us back so much. And that isolation, last week I was telling Jamie this a couple of days ago. I just finished a book. It's called There Goes the Neighborhood. I recommend it to everyone in this room and everyone who's listening. It's a UChicago study. It was conducted between 1990 and 2000. And the sociologist at the university chose 4 neighborhoods to collect data in and to analyze ethnographically as neighborhoods changed rapidly in Chicago between 1990 and 2000. And they were all given pseudonyms because of the controversy that the study was generating and the controversial potential. And Garfield Ridge is the first neighborhood described in this book. And tying it back to my hope for 2025, these UChicago sociologists and their field workers, said Garfield Ridge is very much like a small town. It's geographically isolated from the rest of the city by Midway Airport, and in many other ways, and yet it's home to so many people who spend their careers going out into the city to serve our fellow Chicagoans. And I want us to see ourselves as a part of that greater fabric and tapestry, and I want us to move forward in a way where we can begin doing the hard work of approaching one another with love, with a desire to work together, at the very least with the desire to include one another in this element of community, and not to play to the easy, ugly, low-hanging fruit of race baiting, of fear, of income-based, classist fears, which have often animated discussion in the community. I want us all to be one with each other.
I think that's an amazing note to end it on, Dave. Thank you so much, Nicola, Dave, for the work you guys are doing here in the community. Definitely appreciate it as one of your neighbors, and hopefully everybody checking this out, please be on the lookout for Dave, Nicola, and young people's work here in the neighborhood.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
us, and thank you for listening.
All right, so we just finished up listening to the interview with the student organizers in Garfield Ridge, and they had a lot of great things to say. One of the things that I was really impressed with that Ariana was talking about was how, they kind of changed plans on the fly out of necessity, and just want to give a shout out to the administrators and to the teachers at Kennedy High School who helped, these students and former students organize something important in their neighborhood. So that was great to see. And obviously, the actions, both of them seem to go really well. And hopefully this is the start of something bigger and better, and keeping this conversation about racial justice going on the Southwest side. What do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was very impressed, with what Nicola and David have to share. The impetus to want to do something and be part of this national conversation. Why this neighborhood, which what wouldn't doesn't uh, you know, um, like rallying things up. I think David articulated it very nicely and succinctly. There's a lot of you know, kind of social conservatism that emanates from the kind of community fostering that religious institutions have in the southwest side of Chicago, which has which I appreciate how much they shared of how, being part of that community building. People don't, Nicola mentioned like people don't think about living in a white supremacist society, but like it manifests itself when, these young people want to have a discussion, creates an impetus for like a biker gang to want to confront them, for pushback at these meetings from longstanding community, residents that don't want the discussion to even be had. I really was really impressed with these young people, and like you said, really encouraged to see that they're not deterred, and they're going to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about systemic racism. We're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement trying to push for a more racially just society. And the point where we are today in society has been building up over generations and centuries. And one of the other things that Ariana mentioned that I was really impressed with was, this is a long-term project, and I think the organizers understand that. I think everybody who's been pushing for racial justice over the generations understands that. So, just continue in the struggle, and hopefully and eventually things start going in the right direction, and we have things we can build upon.
Yeah, all politics being local, these local conversations and mutual understandings, we all hope lends to a better future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we wrap up this episode, there are a couple of things I wanted to mention, since we were telling a story about Garfield Ridge to begin with, that we're going to be doing some pretty exciting things in Garfield Ridge over the summer and through the rest of the year. The main thing is we're going to be working on a vaccination effort. We're going to have some canvassers from the neighborhood, young people, very much like the people we talked to in this episode, going door to door and trying to encourage people who haven't gotten vaccinated to get vaccinated, reminding people that the COVID vaccine is free. It is readily available. That's something that we can't say for all healthcare, unfortunately, but for the COVID vaccine, we can. It's safe, it's effective. I was vaccinated as soon as I was able to, and I'm glad I was. And we're going to try to get those numbers up for the sake of community safety around the Southwest side, and specifically in Garfield Ridge is where we're going to be focusing. And then we're also doing a community bike ride coming up on Saturday, August 7th. We do community bike rides the first Saturday of every month. We just did one for July in Wentworth Park, and we're going to be back at Wentworth Park at 10 a.m. on August 7th. We had a really good turnout for the July one, and hopefully we'll have a really good turnout for the August one. We're going to have Divvy bikes too. Divvy is bringing a van full of bikes. So if you don't have a bike, or if you don't want to bring your bike to the ride, feel free to come by anyway, and you can use one of theirs. So anything else to add before we wrap up?
I mean, that sounds like a lot of good things coming up in the neighborhood soon. Looking forward to, doing 2 more episodes next month about how it's all going.
Yeah, we'll have our next episode coming up in 2 weeks. All right. Thanks a lot, Jose. Thanks for listening, everybody.